Well, good evening and welcome to our work session for October 20th, 2025. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as we start out, I just want to remind everybody of our mission and our vision. Our mission is to foster an environment to educate and empower all students today to become global citizens of tomorrow. And the vision, the Baldwinsville community is committed to providing equitable and diverse learning experiences that educate and empower students, allowing each individual to thrive. So, very good thoughts that we endeavor to uphold every time we meet and every time we discuss these opportunities. We did have an incident today that our superintendent wants to talk about. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just real quickly, with regard to the emergency situation, the lockdown at Durgee and the lockout at both Baker High School and Eldon Elementary School today, just wanted to update the board and the community, those that are listening. So we had a quick response with regard to what was believed to be a threat and individual with a weapon in the building. That was obviously not the case, as the communication and the investigation ended up determining. But I wanted to just make sure that folks were aware of the fact that because of the widespread Amazon Web Service outage across the country, that ultimately impacted our Parent Square communication, which was a little disappointing for those of us that were at the command center trying to get communication out as quickly as possible. I honestly think that based on all of the circumstances that we've had, this one went the most efficiently from the communication standpoint on our end, but communication didn't get where it needed to go because of the delay with the Amazon Web Services. So, we'll live and learn with that, and certainly when you rely on those systems, one thing I think is important to communicate to the community is that, and we tell folks this when we send the communication out, there's a link on our website that highlights what to do in an emergency situation if you're a parent or a community member or a staff member. And what we encourage people to do is to use that information to help ease their mind during these situations. So the staff did a great job of responding today, but it also highlights the fact that you really should be utilizing more than one source of information. So even though we have Parent Square, if for some reason that isn't working like it was today, our social media accounts with Facebook and Twitter, and as well as the website, all of the communication was posted on those as the situation unfolded. And so we just want families to know that while we heavily rely on Parent Square, you never know. And today's a case where that was a situation that couldn't have been avoided. So please check all of our sources for updates.
So I think if you're on Parent Square, you can also opt to get an email. Is that correct?
Correct. Email, text message, and voice message. And today, the email, and the app. What was happening was because of the way the outage, the app was being refreshed constantly. That was the one source in the feed. And the email notices were coming through, but those that were relying on the text messages or the voice calls, some of those were not coming for an hour or two after because of the circumstances with that outage.
Thank you for that. So the other thing is that this is October, so all the schools, can you turn these in? Any school is collecting socks, and what is the goal? Is
25,000.
25,000 pair. Okay, so please, anybody stop by any school and bring new socks.
Or the
okay?
library also.
Or the public library. Thank you. Okay. Well, with that, turn it over to Dr. Barbary to start our work session. And do we have one remote board member? We got Luke on?
Yep.
Okay. So Luke, you may have to just say something if you want a question. Just speak up because I may miss you raising your hand on the video. Okay.
All right, so we're excited this evening to have our elementary principals here to share updates with their strategic action plans and where we're going for the 2025-26 school year. So we'll quickly start with Cindy, and they're just going to give a brief update similar to what we did with the secondary, with where they stand with last year, anything that they're still working on this year, and then we'll get right into the action plans for this year.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting us this evening. I think I speak for all of us when I say it's always a pleasure to be here and talk to you about what's happening in our schools. So when we think about the 24-25 school year, it seems like it was so long ago. But we were focusing on those priority areas that were given to us at the beginning of last year, and creating individualized and differentiated education. Of course, primarily, we've had challenged folks at Van Buren to think about how to create a more inclusive environment. And so giving staff the flexibility to think creatively about how to accomplish that. So whereas last year we've had multiple grade levels with 2 sections of integrated co-teaching, this year we have 3 sections out of 4, or 3 sections out of 3 that are integrated co-teaching this year at Van Buren. And I'm sure you'll hear the same information from some of my colleagues. Continuing to do our work in PLCs, so our grade level teams meet every other week with the RTI team to actively discuss student performance on the standardized assessment, so STAR, but also on other data collection points, so that they can dynamically and actively change student groupings as needed, so that they can target those supports. And so that's a continuing and ongoing process. So that was part of what we did last year. In terms of providing project-based learning, we had several staff, not all staff, who participated in PBL training 2 summers ago, but those staff had implemented a PBL unit. Our whole first grade group did it. One of our pre-K classes did it, and I think some of you attended it. It was amazing with Zoom. And so we're continuing to sort of doubling down, and those staff were able to get their colleagues thinking about how they could implement this year. And when we think about social emotional development, we really are focused on TCIS and making sure that staff were trained, particularly the staff that had that direct involvement with students who had the greatest need for that support. We've completed one of the things that we did in terms of prioritizing social emotional development was engaging families and students in a conversation about internet safety. And so that was our community conversation, our community dialogue, and so that was completed last year. We are very thoughtful in last year and continue to be so with our school-based supports. Our therapists, our counselor, our school psychologist, and our promise zone person, so that we could be really dynamic about how we assign them to work with students, or how to be responsive to those students who are in crisis. So that was 24-25 in a very quick summary.
Thank you, everyone. I echo Cindy's sentiment there of welcoming us here tonight. Many of the things that Cindy talked about are priority points of reference for all of us. But at Palmer, we looked and spent a lot of work really looking at our response and intervention work in the building, how to support, not only support students, but also provide enrichment opportunities. That being the case, we've tried to diversify services, really look at individual needs of students, and really drill down into what are the best types of supports to provide opportunities for success for kids. It's an ongoing work in progress. We've tried to play with time, frequency, all of those things, trying to really nail down what's best to support students. As Cindy talked about with PBL, which we'll talk a little bit more, project-based learning, we still continue to explore opportunities and ways for students to show what they know in a variety of ways, in creative ways, that may not just be those pencil and paper, assignments or whatever, but opportunities for kids to talk about the things that they're learning about and share that information with others. We had some success with some implemented PBL units last year, and the sky is the limit this year. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We've also looked at really integrating our support services into the classrooms, our speech, PT, OT, really having those folks push as much as they possibly can into classroom environments to support kids, just because if you know any of those folks, and I can really speak to the people at Palmer, they have wonderful, wonderful personalities that they just impact kids in such a positive way. So not only the students, individual students they're working with, but the whole classroom benefits from those other really caring adults. So that's something that we have tried to do, and I laugh with people like Mo Murphy, who have educated the entire Baldwinsville community for 42 years. Like, the impact that lady's had is just tremendous, and they do such a wonderful job. To Cindy's point with PBL, we did implement some units. We have quite a few more units that will be implemented at grade levels this year. But our leadership team has been kind of a sounding board for people's successes and really a way for some momentum to be built and that capacity amongst other staff. So that's something we continue to talk about. We talked about even this year at the September 23rd PEC Day. We as well have done a lot of social emotional work and skill development with students. Addition of our school counselors at the elementary level has had a tremendous impact on that. Whole group lessons, that many more small group experiences that can be provided to students because of just additional support staff in the building. And so that has really provided a lot of students with opportunities for growth and success, not only in the whole group setting, but small groups and individual supports for students that need them. So many of those things are areas that we continue to work with, but I think that some of those things have really closed in some ways and maybe opened our eyes to other needs that kids have. So that was a snapshot of Palmer for 24-25.
I'm going to echo many of the things that Van Buren and Palmer talked about. We really tried to use last year to build on this year, and I'll talk more about that when we talk about 25-26. But some of the highlights when we're talking about recognizing and supporting the unique academic needs of students is we redesigned our curriculum night in order to get more families in, because we know that families, students who have families who are involved are usually more successful, and we were able to get more families into the building. And we did the same for our RTA night, family engagement, and really increased how many families came and got to see what their students were doing while engaging in RTI in school, and also gave things that they could work on at home that were engaging and fun. We increased staff attendance around the science of reading in order to better support literacy, and this was, I know, across the district, that's something that we were working on. And we made sure that we were doing our transition meetings for students that were, needing a little bit more support, and making sure going from second grade to third grade, or third grade to fourth grade, that there was a smooth transition between teachers. We really did continue to evolve our social emotional supports. More teachers attended TCIS in order to support the students that might need it, and using our BIMAS data, we really honed in and had smaller groups to support the needs of students within the building, and that, in conjunction with everything that they're doing. In PBL, one of the highlights for us was our connection with Derby. We had Derby students working on a PBL project that they came and presented in our building, and really engaged students, and has built momentum for what we're going to do this year with Derby and get
more students involved, and not just the teachers that said, oh yeah, this would be neat. All teachers are going to do it in order to be a little bit more reciprocal and more project-based at our level, and engage our students at Derby as well.
So can I ask, so Derby comes and does a presentation?
They designed, so they worked, teachers basically volunteered, like, okay, yes, I would love to work with you. And the Derby students wrote proposal letters, like, I would like to come and teach this. And teachers responded back, like, okay, here are some suggestions, here are some pointers of what you may need to do depending on the grade level. And Derby 9th graders came down and taught a lesson in those classrooms, and then did learned a story walk throughout the building, and there's just different teaching points all hung up in the building, and they came and had the students walk through and participated in that. And after seeing it, the entire building was like, we want to do it. Like, they, getting to see it. So we now designed it so our kids will be doing part of the project as well, not just on the receiving end. So it goes back and forth.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So at Eldon, in terms of recognizing the needs of all students, we were able to complete most of our goals. We worked on wellness boxes in the classroom, working on making sure we're keeping students within that classroom setting, and really trying to be creative with it, so thinking about classroom schedules and zones of regulation. We also had a building-wide focus on vocabulary. We did a word of the day on our announcements, and our 4th and 5th grade students actually helped work on those and present them. They actually were that was our community cafe topic, and they were really excited to come and present on it during that time, so that was really great. Our one, we have one in progress still, and that's just because we want to continue to hone that. We have our grade levels utilizing a WIN model during RTI, and we're expanding that this year. Every single grade level is doing it at both reading and math, so that's something that we're excited about. So we kept it in progress because we feel like that's something we're continuing on. With regard to PBL, we definitely did something pretty exciting. So when my teachers went, every grade level had this idea for something that they wanted to do that matched standards at their grade level, but was sort of similar. So we did this entry event where we had people that were formerly Eldon Eagles, whether staff, students. They created videos, and then I compiled them all into one, and we showed it to students for like an entry event. So even if you weren't trained in PBL, and even if you didn't do the actual project after, they all got to be a part of this exciting entry event. So that was really fun. We did that. We had our staff share. We said we were going to have them share at the first staff meeting about their experiences over the summer. They actually shared it at more than one staff meeting, which was great. And then we shared a lot about PBL. We had discussions about the equity levers during our staff meetings, and then I shared a lot of PBL type things via my weekly newsletter, things like that. So just trying to keep it as a focus area for us. And then with regard to SEL and that goal, we did have all classrooms receive one push-in lesson from Second Step, which was really cool because it was not just a randomly chosen lesson, it was specifically chosen based on our BIMUS data. So we really appreciated making sure that, what we were doing. And some classes did receive more than that, but we had committed to every classroom receiving one. We also kind of reinvented our quiet room space, which I know we talked about, and included some different sensory things in there. And then our in-progress one, we are really still very much, I would say, starting this year. So we had talked about sort of reorganizing our MPSS for our social, emotional, and behavioral supports. And at Eldon, we just had a situation last year where we found ourselves down a few support staff members, and so we really felt like we needed to kind of restart that one this year. So that one is currently in progress, and we're excited about what we're going to do with that this year. Yes, sorry, Cass is right over you.
So a lot of things in common for McNamara. I'll just highlight a couple of the things that we specifically focused on across the building. One being a really science of reading. So our building leadership team wanted to take a more focused approach to specific components of science of reading. So we really focused on vocabulary instruction. We felt like that was a piece that was not really consistent across the building. We felt like we were really strong in phonics instruction and our phonemic awareness piece because of some of the resources that we have. We felt like vocabulary was all over the place, just really based on teachers' previous learning around that topic. So at one of the November Superintendent's Conference Day, our psychologist turned key to state training on vocabulary and best practices in vocabulary instruction that almost all of our teachers attended. And then we did a school-wide vocabulary word of the week, really just to keep the focus on vocabulary instruction for students and for teachers and for families as well. And then in regards to science of reading, since we were focusing so much on that topic in our building, we also wanted to share that with our families. And so our McNamara Community Cafe was on an overview of the science of reading, which is really hard to do. I mean, most science of reading trainings, when they're thorough, are weeks and weeks long, but we summed it up into about an hour that we felt like parents could take away the biggest pieces of what the science of reading is. And we actually had teachers come to that too that hadn't had as much training, especially some of our like 4th and 5th grade teachers, and so that was really beneficial for them as well. And then in regards to PBL, we had a pretty good sized group get trained in our first cohort, and so we had some grade levels where the whole team was trained and they did big, larger projects as a whole team, and then we had some teachers that were just trained and they were the only one on their team. So we saw a big range of what PBL looked like in action in the building last year, and we tried to come together. I think we came together 2 or 3 times where we sat down as a group of everyone who'd been trained, just as kind of like a status update and how everybody's feeling, how their projects had gone, what resources they needed, and things like that. And then in regards to social emotional learning, we started off the year doing an IME project where we used resources that were provided by our PTA. They're the Colors of the World crayons markers, and we did, our art teacher, who was brand new at the time, led the whole school in a building-wide self-portrait that we had across our building for a few months. So that was a nice way to introduce the use of those materials. We also, at the beginning of the year, did a refresher on restorative practices. Our whole staff has been trained in restorative practices, but we just felt like as a leadership team that to really keep that alive in the building, that we wanted to touch base on the basics of restorative practices and make sure everyone had access to the resources. And then last year, we also had every single teacher implement 1 unit of Second Step in the classroom. Second Step is the social emotional learning program that now across the district, all of the teachers are implementing the whole program in their classrooms. But we wanted to give our teachers an opportunity to just kind of try a unit, see how it felt, have support from the social worker who had used the program for a long time. And so that was really our springboard into doing the whole program this year.
Can I just ask, so what is the earliest grade, can you do PBL at the first grade level or?
Pre-K.
Pre-K.
You're only doing it pre-K?
Yeah.
Wow.
Can I just ask, just so that I understand what you're talking about, integrated co-teaching, can you just tell 3 sentences on what that is?
Sure, so that's our, one of our main models that we use for special education services. And so what that looks like kind of in writing on the IEP is that a student who requires special education services has integrated co-teaching for part of ELA and for part of math. What it looks like in practice is that we have the general education teacher and the special education teacher teaching in the classroom together. So students aren't leaving the classroom for the interventions or supports that they need. It requires a lot of code planning with, between the 2 teachers. And then the special ed teacher really focuses on how do I take everything that's happening in this classroom and make it accessible for the students that have IEPs, which looks different for every single student and what they need. So they work together as a team to provide the special education students with the supports they need.
And when you say you have like 2 classrooms of integrated co-teaching, that means there's a special ed teacher there all the time, or there's 2 classrooms they push into? And when you were saying like speech pushes in, so sometimes that would happen too. Sometimes there would be a special ed teacher and sometimes there would be somebody else.
Yeah, so at Palmer and, speaking across the board, those multiple code talk classrooms at each grade level equals the special ed teacher being split between classrooms throughout the course of the day at a particular grade level or grade levels to support students.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we transition to the goals for 25-26? Okay, then similar process, we're gonna start off with goal number 1, which is consistent for each of the elementary schools. That's to improve student achievement by expanding available learning opportunities to meet the strengths and needs of all students.
Okay, so when we came together as a building leadership team over the summer, our first step is to review the priority areas, take a look at this table and sort of see what the elements are. And then the leadership team starts that work of determining, how does that fit with our school? What does that look like at Van Buren? How can we have an impact on that area with respect to not just attending to the goal, but also in a way that benefits our students? So the first step that we did is we took a look at some of those areas where we felt that we needed improvement and where we could have an impact. So we decided to continue those bi-weekly grade level PLCs for data analysis to inform instruction and to allow us to create differentiated reading and math intervention groups. The PLC process is considered, it never ends. It's a we can always be better kind of process, and so that's why we decided to continue that and make that, you'll likely see that in progress all the time. We've also made a determination based on some of the research that we did and the gap analysis that we did with state assessment data. We decided to reintroduce the RACES rating protocol. We have been using that with fidelity in the building. However, we have many new teachers who are new to our building, and rather than have them come in and try to introduce a different protocol for students with respect to writing, we want students to be able to carry this information and this knowledge and this practice from pre-K through 5th grade, continuing to expand on it. And so we're reintroducing it so that the whole building has the opportunity to either learn or refresh on that practice. And we think that will really give us the opportunity to improve student rating and student performance, not only on state assessments, but on assessments in school. And we've already completed this third bullet, which is technology training for all staff on grade level educational apps. So we had aligned our September 23rd PDC day to these priority goals, and so the gap analysis I've already spoken about to address improving student achievement. We also had the RTI team that reviewed the math literacy briefs with all teachers, and the instructional technology piece was presented by Doreen Bergman, who is our sub-librarian this year. Doreen knows more about library science and the apps that are available than any of us could possibly even forget. So she was an expert, and we were so fortunate to have her do that presentation. Some of our seasoned teachers who were pretty strong in technology walked away with new information and new practices that they can implement in the classroom.
So similarly to Cindy, we looked at ironically some of the same things in terms of Cindy mentioning the RACES writing strategy. We kind of are looking to revitalize. We have revitalized our constructive response curriculum, which was basically the continuum we developed at Palmer Elementary. So that we ensured students were having exposure to those constructive kind of response type questions at a very developmentally appropriate level. So we have backed that all the way to pre-K now with 4 sections of pre-K at Palmer. And each of those grade levels, adds a piece so that ultimately, as Cindy said, kids at 5th grade have become very knowledgeable, very adept in their writing and aspects of writing that are going to help them be successful in assessments. We collect information from classroom teachers 4 times a year. They provide prompts to students. Students are responding. We're collecting that data so that we are very well aware of where kids are in that skill development, which then allows us to provide individual intervention if needed, small group intervention to support the needs of students at all levels. Again, really a lot of the aims of student improvement is reflection and discussion about how things have worked with particular individuals, but also reflecting on practice. So we did a lot and have done a lot for the start of the year, really establishing some expectations for just general student performance data reviews at grade levels. Cindy talked about the gap analysis. We spent a lot of time with that, especially at grades 3, 4, 5. But conversations in early September and October as well, really looking at the fact that each individual classroom and teacher at Palmer plays an important role in building students from pre-K to 5th grade. And so that if everyone is kind of rowing in the same direction, everyone is, filling the bucket, so to speak, you have a very skilled group of 5th grade students, but that everyone, pre-K to start, all the way through 5th grade, has a responsibility to take on the overall performance of the building. So we looked at that gap analysis. It was really interesting because obviously pre-K through 2 teachers are not super knowledgeable of those gap analysis reports because it's really not the world that they live in, so to speak, because those are not grades that are assessed, by state assessment. So while I was a little bit nervous, those conversations were really, they were great conversations with staff, and I think leading into the next piece, it really allowed for some vertical kind of alignment conversations so that, again, as Cindy talked about, teachers that are new, people that have not necessarily been through all of the training or been exposed, it allowed them to really talk about what things looked like at other grade levels and where kids need to be and where that handoff needs to be to make sure that they are preparing students to be successful as they transition from 2nd to 3rd or 3rd to 4th or pre-K to kindergarten for that matter. And we have really seen that people have taken specific interest. I think they wholeheartedly want to pass off the best product that they can. So those conversations did a lot for us in the building and conversations that we'll continue to have.
So at Reynolds, many of the things that, again, you're gonna hear some themes here, right? At Reynolds, one of the things.
We would hope to hear those themes because that means you're talking about the best practices across, so yes.
Exactly. One of the things that we did as a leadership team is we looked at our building schedule, our master schedule, and reworked it so we could have RTI happening and then students moving from classroom to classroom within the same grade level based on their needs, where they needed a little bit of extra help, or something that we're really excited about and really proud of. If students were ready to get enrichment, if they were on grade level and they're ready to be pushed to the next level, they have that opportunity. They'll be in a group to do that. So that's one of the things we did, and we call it Leap to Literacy and March to Math, so we're doing it both in math and in literacy. In conjunction with that, we're restructuring our data meetings to support this because often we're focusing on, the needs in RTI and, how we're grouping our RTI students, but now we're using that same data to figure out how we're grouping our students that are going to be moving from classroom to classroom. And we came up with this idea, and it came from, kind of some of my past experience when, some of us are really good at teaching something and we can just get kids to get it. And that's like their specialty. Why not capitalize on that throughout grade levels? And so, somebody may be really good at teaching fractions, but that is my weakness. Like I always just kind of stumble through it. Let's have kids work with that teacher that just gets kids to understand fractions. And that's just an example I'm coming up with. And then in grade 3, looking at, and I know we're doing an elementary literacy curriculum review right now, but when we're talking about science and social studies instruction, one of the things that they're doing is piloting some books that, making a text set, which is supported with the science of reading, and they are looking at how to teach those social studies concepts and science concepts through books and literacy, and it's this whole, they have passports and they're going from country to country, and truly there's pilot costumes that they're wearing and kids love it, and they're doing that, and it's not taking the place of any of their reading instruction. It is for helping get kids hooked on the social studies and the science that's happening in grade 3, in conjunction with the other, like with PLTW and that, but this is just a different way kids are into it. There was somebody that dressed up as security, and TSA, and they were in the hallway. I was like, who is this? Like, I couldn't see on the camera. I was like, why is there a security person in the hallway? And then we all kind of spoke about this for our in-house PDC day. I got pretty jazzed because we were able to focus on what we're doing in-house, and we all spoke to the gap analysis, and it was really good, like thoughtful conversations about that vertical alignment. And we actually posed the question, and we had to say we have to trust each other, and we need to really, it's not a finger pointing, but if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, what is one thing we wish our 2nd graders were coming up to 3rd grade with? If they could spend a little bit more time on that, and it's not that they're not trying to do it, it's just what is that one skill or one topic that would really benefit them in the following year. And we used our gap analysis data in order to do that and align with our priority standards as well. And then in the literacy, Scarborough's Rope, they looked at the gap analysis, and Scarborough's Rope for science and reading, they looked at their gap analysis and the standards where we could use improvement, and they put where it falls on the Scarborough's Rope, what part of it could they hone in on that. And it was hanging up in my office, and it's like, we have a joke, it's like at the end of the rope. So, but they really got to see like the data and the priority standards and how it impacts reading, and that was something that they really took a lot from and have pictures of.
Awesome, okay. So at Eldon, I know I talked about this before, we are continuing the implementation of those WIN groups at RTI, and it sounds kind of similar, I think, to, as we've said, to what Kate is working on. One of the things that we really wanted to get to this year was the integration of our RTI staff into our grade level PLC meetings. So our grade levels meet weekly at the end of the day, and in order for these groupings to work, they really need, RTI staff need time to meet with grade level team teachers in order to talk about students. How are they progressing? What changes need to be made to these groups? They're flexible groupings, and so giving them that time together was really imperative to the groupings, really being successful. We also are talking about the use of our PLC time to work through the continuous, or I just heard today, collaborative improvement cycle. So something that we're really excited about, it's kind of this cycle where you talk about potentially identifying gaps, right? We're talking about student achievement. So are there gaps? Why are there gaps? What is our plan to close the gap? And then is that plan working? And so those 4 questions are going to guide those PLC discussions, and we're going to continuously move through those. I mean, it might be something where a team might move through multiple cycles, or they stay with that same gap and continue to work on it throughout the year. We loved our word of the day last year, so we're going to continue with that, but we did know that McNamara had a lot of success for the word of the week, so we did change to word of the week this year. And our feedback from our teachers too was that they wanted more time to focus on a specific word. The word of the day went really quick, and actually we heard that in our discussion at our community cafe as well. So we were excited to say, okay, we're going to focus on it for a week, and each day there's maybe explicit instruction on our announcement of what the word is, but then we're also including those science of reading strategies, so giving examples and non-examples, giving students opportunities to work with that word in a meaningful way, and having it be throughout the week has really helped with that, which is really exciting. And then, I know that this group is aware Eldon was identified last year as a school in need of targeted support and improvement. And so this last bullet actually came out of what I call our CEP team. They created our school comprehensive education plan. And so we brought it to leadership, and to be perfectly honest, though, these 2 plans, our strategic plan and our CEP plan, are very aligned, which makes a lot of sense because we have our key strategies for that are our goals here. But one thing that came out of that we're excited about are the implementation of buddy classrooms with a literacy focus. So this was something our teachers thought
was going to be really exciting for our students. We actually are very lucky to have Baker students come down. We have a mentor program that Jen Medwin and I work on together, and so we have Baker students coming in a lot, and our students get really excited about having the older students come down and be in the classrooms. And the older students are incredible. Some are there 2 days a week, and then we've had a few reach out and say, can we come every day? And as long as the teacher's okay with it, we allow it, which is amazing. But we thought, okay, so why don't we take that, continue it, but also do it within our own school. So we paired up kindergarten with 5th grade, 1st grade with 3rd grade, and 2nd grade with 4th grade. And some of the ideas that have come out so far are having guest readers from your buddy classroom, having buddy readers together. I know 5th and kindergarten have planned a group activity coming up in a month or so. And so we said, hey, once a month we're gonna get our buddy classrooms together, but we already have groups that have met, and more than that, even just in October. So that's another thing that we're excited about.
Okay, for McNamara, we're focusing on a few different things this year. A lot of things in common with the other buildings. First, like the gap analysis reports, we're reviewing those in our grade level team meetings, which we meet once every other month, myself with the team. But then they're taking, that's really just the start of the conversation, and they're taking the gap analysis reports and bring it to their data meetings, their PLC meetings, where they can talk through some of the trends that they notice in the gap analysis reports, also in conjunction with some of the release state test questions, and how we can just start to plan how we can incorporate that information a little bit more into their instruction. But also a focus for the building this year is going to be disaggregating some of the data that we have. The program that we use for benchmarking, STAR, through Renaissance Learning, has a new function. They redid the whole thing on us. We're all still trying to figure out how to manipulate everything in the platform, but it's great because there's a new screen that you can use to disaggregate the data right within the program. And so we can take a snapshot of our school and look at our fall benchmarking data and start to see where are we seeing some disproportionalities between our overall population in our school and our overall achievement compared to the population of subgroups within the building, by race or by students with disabilities. So that's something that we want to explore a lot more this year, both at the grade level team meetings, but also building wide at our building leadership team meetings. We've already completed on the September 23rd PEC day, we did a pretty big deep dive into the New York State math briefs, which were released by the state in the spring. They're a really great roadmap for really the foundation of math instruction. So it's not, a program or anything like that, but a lot of what we had conversation around with one of our learning coaches, Emily Castor, was how do we take some of these foundational research-based practices and connect it to our math program and make sure that we're providing the best instruction we can for our students. And a lot of it was really around building students' mindsets around math instruction and that whole growth mindset piece, because some students really struggle in math and it can be feeling, they can feel like they can easily give up, and so we wanted to build the mindset piece as well. And then coming up this winter, one of the other things that we identified over the summer in our building leadership team is that we wanted to target writing instruction. Our teachers have been feeling that way for a little while, and they wanted to have a focus on that area. And so we are partnering with Kate Franz, who is a literacy specialist, really has a great background in science of reading and writing. We've used her quite often in the district over the last couple of years as we're building our knowledge in science of reading. And so we're doing a book study with a text called The Writing Revolution, which is not a writing program. It's, again, some foundational knowledge for teachers around the writing process, particularly at the sentence level, and how can we expand ideas and really beef up students' writing. So we're working with her to see which teachers would be interested in doing the book study, but she's turning it really more into 3 PD sessions that we're going to do after school, and she's going to bring in some research-based articles as well. So that's an area that our teachers are very excited to target this year.
Can I just ask, so we've gotten state assessment scores, and I know I haven't seen the ones that measure the cohort yet, but I understand that they've done well, they're improving. What my question is, what do you really look at in terms of what are you trying to achieve? Because they're looking at proficiency, and what are we generally 50 to 60% by for each building is what I saw. I saw a few below 50, but what should we get to? And is that a target that you put on your stuff each time, or in your progress of your targets? So I just want to talk more about that. There's been a lot of discussion on the board about academics and improving academics, and you obviously are centered on that because I hear some great ideas coming out. But where should we be, or where should we get to on those state assessments is kind of the question I was looking to grappling with.
So I'm in the hot seat. So obviously we always want students to be high achieving. What percentage, of course, we'd like it to be more in the 90s. And I think that this year, more than ever, and it started this summer, with all of the PDs that teachers were attending, we've really changed our focus. We've always focused on academics, but this year it's just different. The conversations are different. Just among the team, the way that the PDC day was planned, everything had a purpose based on what we were doing when we were looking at the data. So, in the past, being able to sit in this seat just to see that we're talking about the gap scores. We would get the gap scores and we'd maybe talk about it for, right then and there for maybe the first week. But now we're talking about it, we're continually assessing, monitoring what we're doing, and trying to adjust those gaps that we see. And I think where the conversation has shifted is now we're looking all the way at pre-K. We understand that what we're doing early on is just as important as what we're doing in third on up. And we've always had a focus on New York State test scores. But it starts at the bottom, and we have to be consistent. And I know that we're headed in that direction. We're going to keep utilizing all the data that we have, and really trying to get kids above that for next year. We have to start in small increments. So for us, 70% would be a goal next year. And then, then the following year, grow a little bit more. But slow and steady wins the race. We want to get there and we want to stay there.
Absolutely agree with your a little improvement each year. And we have learned, or I've learned, that academics is not just presenting the material, it's connecting with the kid and getting a learning response out of how you present it. So I understand the educating the whole child, and I understand not every child's going to get 80% or 90%, but we want to do the best we can. So we understand it's a piece, but it's not, you're talking about a lot of different components, yes.
And just to add to that, so I think ultimately the goal is to see that continuous improvement. So what you see on the screen from 24-25 for ELA district-wide, there's an increase, okay? That's a good thing. We didn't see any slide. Same thing with mathematics. And then when you look at the cohort views, you can see from the cohort views, I believe all with the exception of one grade level here, this is important because it shows growth from grade to grade, which I think is more important because when you're looking at the other data, it's based on
kids you're measuring,
different students at a grade level. But what is important for us is to track and monitor and to see the improvement that students are making from grade level to grade level. And that's why it's so important that we focus in during the school year, not only on this data, but also the universal screening data that we constantly go through at the building levels 3 times a year when they have their universal screening. So I think it's important that just clearly communicate that we're looking for growth. It'd be nice to have the significant increases. Who knows? I think with some of the strategies that are being put into place this year specifically, and the focus that these principals and their teams of teachers have emphasized, I think we're going to see more growth than we've seen in previous years.
I also just wanted to add, we haven't seen our beginning pre-Kers who started in the 21-22 school year hit 3rd grade to take those New York State assessments yet. they're only in second grade this year, so we still got a little bit of time to wait. And even those students had that half-year program, but it's exciting to know that that's coming ahead, and we'll continue to monitor that data appropriately.
Where is that file that you were just sharing, the 2004 versus 2010? So it is actually connected to all of the action plans, tied right here under the 3 through 8 assessments. Thank you. Yep.
So I just want to add to, Daniel makes a beautiful graphic. But the power in the state assessment really for us is when we do that analysis, teachers are taking a look at the release test questions and looking at where did we perform really well and where do we need to show improvement, and really analyzing the question, the structure of the question, what the question was asking, the vocabulary of the question, and then comparing the performance within the building on that question so that we can really dig down and see how can we be better about addressing the standard that's associated with that question. So from a practical standpoint, that's how we use the state assessment data in our meetings.
So as we,
I just want to say, and also I wanted to add that, you know, over the past few years, we've added quite a bit of mental health support. So that was our focus for a couple of years coming out of the pandemic, where now we're seeing the shift because there's a different feeling in the buildings. And I've noticed it just in the month and a half we've been in school. You know, there's a lot of support for our students, but students are really adjusting a lot better. I think teachers are, you know, we're trained with TCIS, we have restorative practices, and I think that we're all in a better place to manage students that have some difficulties, which then in turn allows us to focus more on those academics. So I do think that each year moving forward, we will see that growth.
So we're going to transition now to goal number 2, which is the continuation of project-based learning. Because it's a continuation, they're going to highlight the one area that's an addition that they're continuing to do work since it's an ongoing update.
So to implement PBL with fidelity, really, the staff who are doing that need to receive the professional development and the training. However, we've broken our goal into 2 parts this year. So the folks who have already attended the training, who have initiated PBL last year, who went to the training this year, will implement or redesign or adjust the unit that they've already created. And we're already starting to see some of those units in play this year, and the teachers are saying, wow, you know, this is how, you know, we reflected and how we can be better. And then for the staff who haven't been trained yet, you know, there are always projects that are being done. I know our 2nd and 3rd grade team on the PVC day, we don't have staff in those 2 grade levels that were trained. However, we took a look at, each of those grade levels chose a project unit that they currently do and started looking at how does that compare to PBL, what criteria are already existing that are similar to PBL, and how can they adopt or adjust that current unit to be more PBL-like until they're able to have that training.
as Cindy stated, similarly at Palmer, we have a fairly significant cohort of individuals that have been trained. I think that at this point, there's only 1 grade level that does not have a trained member. So we will be looking at, and currently after the PDC day in September, we have that 1 grade level working with our district learning coaches. We're looking at full implementation at all grade levels, a project this year for all students in the building. And with a goal of that 1 grade level without a trained member, they will be going through the training by this summer. There's been a commitment there and an expectation set. So, you know, the people that did the training were aligned with professionals that worked them through the process, helped them to develop their units. And so we really talked about trust as well. If there is a trusted grade level colleague that has been through that training, that has written that PBL unit, there is no reason that the entire grade level is not able to make that happen. And so that was the expectation. It was well received, and you know, there's a little bit to be said about a little pressure from your colleagues and people that had not been through the training understood that this is where we're going, and so we're moving in that direction. So we'll be full implementation of Palmer this year.
As I spoke to a little bit earlier, we are expanding our connection with Derby in order to have all classrooms participate in this. And in some, grade levels picked a standard that Derby students also are familiar with, because many of our standards build as they, as they go through the years. And what is one of the standards that has longevity that we will see build? It's not like a one-off. And there's connection to both the Derby students, and there will be a positive impact on the elementary students, and they designed what would look like an effective and helpful project that Derby could work with them. So there's a bigger connection there. And speaking to your question about like how young, pre-K, all of our pre-K teachers in our building went to the PBL training this summer, and with many of their standards, they had great ideas. One of them has to do with farming, and if you know Reynolds, we have a courtyard in the middle, and they were like, can we have a farm? And I said, no. Love your enthusiasm, but that's a no. But they're even starting down there in order to, build upon the PBL for students at the pre-K level.
Okay, so at Eldon, we really excited about that September 23rd day where we were able to focus on building level initiatives. We hosted 2 PBL sessions, one everyone attended, and it was specific to essential question writing, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then the other one was specific to AI and PBL, which was really exciting. Our 2 of our teachers ran that. Can't say enough about how great it was that our teachers were running all of these professional development opportunities. So we have committed to essential question writing at Eldon. I'm really excited about that. So essential or driving question writing, it is a big piece of PBL. It's something that would kind of maybe spark or start a unit, but it's also a really great practice within the classroom. So during that professional development workshop, our teachers gave examples and talked about how to do that, and our teachers have committed to use that within their classroom. So it's kind of like our way of stepping in, right? You might not have been trained, but now you know how to do this piece. Last, really excited, we had a teacher who really wanted to implement a pineapple calendar, and so it is a calendar with dates, times, and topics that you could visit another teacher's classroom. And so we actually are starting this week, really excited about it, and PBL will be one of those topics. So if you haven't been trained, you could go into another classroom, even just for 10 minutes, and see what that looks like in practice.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
The essential questions, how did you present that?
So we had a group that had been trained. There were 2 teachers in particular who did a project last year. I think actually many people in this room came and were clients. They built tiny homes. It was a really great project. So they came and explained their project, and then they shared what their essential question was. And then what they did was they talked about, okay, so we might typically ask, I'm gonna be super basic here, because of course, off the top of my head, how might you multiply these 2 numbers, right? But then when they talked about working toward getting to an essential question, which might be much more open-ended, might need some investigation or thought to get to that answer, and that's how we then get students thinking about, okay, well, what could we do to solve the answer to that, versus, I'm gonna show you how to multiply this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was curious about, is how deep, how at different grade levels, right, you go different, you do a little different.
Yeah.
Are you at the level yet where you're introducing universal values, or is it strictly a functional, practical, utilitarian sort of essential question presentation? Because usually at younger ages it's more utilitarian, and when you get a little older you get into shared values to understand why the question is essential. Right?
So I guess I would probably say it's going to depend on a couple things. Maybe grade level, right? But also to me that's going to be comfortability of the teacher. So like if our teachers have been through this training and they're comfortable taking it to that, they're probably going to, whereas it might just be, I've never taken the training, but I did go to this project or this workshop. I'm gonna dive in just to that first stage and get my students thinking about something deeper. Does that make sense? I
That
would say,
makes
yeah.
total sense, and that's actually why I asked the question, because it really is a question of training. And
Yeah.
and I just kinda wanted to find out where you are and just encourage you to look at that part of the training, because as you get, as these kids move up in grade level, right, they're gonna be getting, this is gonna be morphing into different things in social studies and English and
Yeah.
all kinds of things. So
I
that's
agree.
a big deal.
I agree, and I also feel like, so writing them was something that I feel like I got better at as I did it. So I also think starting like this is a great place to start, and then as we have more teachers take the training and practice writing them, they're bouncing ideas off of each other, it will get to that level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a lot of things in common. We also focused on PBL on the September 23rd day. All of our staff who have not been trained, including our teaching assistants, had an overview training, just so that they know when PBL is happening in the classroom, what they're seeing and how they can support students. But we had our teachers who have been trained go to a separate space. And we focused on some different resources that have been put together by district learning coaches that can help as they're rewriting units or writing more units. One area that we're really focusing on with our trained staff this year is the concept of the dimmer switch. So over the PBL Works training, they really are teaching teachers how to do PBL to make these what they call gold standard units. And that's where they have all of the PBL components in that unit, to the fullest degree. And so right now we're expecting teachers to do 1 unit, 2 units where they're adding things on. The concept of the dimmer switch is like, if that's full on lights, how do you dim it down a little bit and still incorporate elements of PBL into your instruction that is maybe not a full PBL unit? So how do you incorporate questioning? How do you incorporate authentic products? And so our teachers who are trained in PBL are looking at ways that they can incorporate those important elements, even though they're maybe not always functioning at that gold standard level, but they're bringing those pieces into their other instruction.
Are there any other questions about PBL?
Just, not really a question, but I read an article recently, and I wish I could give you the source, because it was really interesting, and it wasn't an indictment of education, but it was more a commentary about, in our educational systems, all the way from grade school through secondary, through undergraduate, through graduate, the focus is often feeding information and then assessing, did you get that information, not building curiosity. And, you're making me think about that as you're talking about, PBL, and I just wondered what you thought about that, and if you think, we're doing any of that, building curiosity here in Baldwinsville. Are there things the board can do to support things like that, or do you think it's a bunch of baloney and, what I mean, and we gotta just focus on the data and, are we assessing the right thing?
It's not baloney. I think we fall into that trap of giving information and assessing how well did we give that information, and going back to the essential question, that gives the opportunity for you to interrogate students and say, why are you learning this, right? If they don't understand the why, then it really doesn't have value, because a lot of students do not associate success with a grade, but with an accomplishment. And so you really do, we can't forget always to tell students, this is what you're learning, but this is why you're learning this. And PBL offers that opportunity for students to apply that knowledge. And I think of our pre-K PBL unit, which was a zoo. 4-year-olds researched animals and habitats and diet and all of those other things that are considered sort of higher level thinking skills, and then they dressed as those animals and then presented it. And we had staff and students who came through those presentations and said, I don't think I could have done that. Well, you could. You could have done that. You could do something equally as magical if you're given the tools, and it's the curiosity, right? Inspiring that desire to know why.
Yeah, and you just don't know with something like that if you're gonna spark somebody's interest in some obscure thing that's really not part of the curriculum. And I was looking at a lot of your, your plans, and one of the things you all had was to increase the extracurricular offerings. And that too, you know, when it's tied into academics, you know, might just spark, you know, something in a student that, you know, they end up pursuing as a lifelong interest. Anyway.
So that is actually a perfect segue into the final goal area when you think about security and safety and allowing students to feel connected. So we can transition to that final goal.
Can I go first?
You can go
So, this is a really important topic to us, because as principals, we know that's our main priority, just to exemplify what happened today. You know, we focus on that, you know, to the extreme. And having an SRO and ID badges and locked doors, those are all important things, but we know that primarily safety and security happens here. And so we focused in our building leadership team and in our PLCs and our meetings on how do we support student mental health, because students are safer, the school's community is safer, if they are getting, if they feel supported and cared for and welcomed and nurtured, and if not, that they can get the extra support that they need in order to achieve that. So with that in mind, we've decided, typically our PLCs had an academic focus, so we were really talking about ELA and math. We've added SEL components to our standing PLC agenda, so that the grade level team is talking about where they're at in the implementation of second step. What restorative circles are they running? Everybody is in line with P2 because of the calendar. They're introducing and having discussions with students around each of those character traits every week. We are doubling down on the use of our BIMAS data to inform student interventions, and so we'll be training staff, particularly the students who have been recommended to the instructional support team, so IST, so that we can be more targeted and specific in the interventions that we're providing for them, providing those tier 2 and tier 3 behavioral supports. TCIS, we've trained all of our, so with this last round of training, all of our special education teachers have been trained. We've had the majority of our teaching assistants who have been trained, and we try to have our new teaching assistants go, so we're going to continue to do that, but also making sure that those skills and practices are implemented reliably throughout the building. And culture and engagement, if students are more engaged, if we have more intramural activities and extracurricular offerings, we feel that that's another way to help students feel a sense of belonging with the school.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Does the BIMAS look the same throughout elementary and high school?
So the difference in the BIMAS is at elementary school, the teachers complete it,
Oh, okay.
right? So it's based on their observations of students.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So as Cindy talked about with the SRO, it's been a tremendous piece added to our buildings in so many ways. I mean, the personality, I can speak to a lot of the SROs because I know them, but the SRO at Palmer has had such a tremendous impact on, I think, the school community. We really looked this year at the real security and safety piece in a couple ways. I can't take a lot of credit for it other than the brainstorming, because Lynette Plank, who's my school librarian, is really the brains behind the whole thing. But after some technology-related issues at the end of last year, we decided at Palmer that we're going to create kind of a user agreement, a tech user agreement for students that's been pushed out with the help of Eric Ziegler to all the elementary buildings, really talking about responsible usage of technology in the building. That being the case, we passed out the user agreement to all students, grades 2 through 5. We received a signed copy of that user agreement back from every parent at Palmer, which has been great. And it pretty much outlines the expectations, not only for students individually, but also what can happen if students potentially are not using technology appropriately that impacts their overall classroom or the entire school community. So it's been very well received, it's very clearly written. You know, Eric Ziegler had some oversight over that as well. So that was a piece really to fulfill a need for us at Palmer, and we hope that that spills out into the other buildings and the same sort of success. In that same line, we hosted our community cafe on October 9th in conjunction, again, development of the program, presentation with Lynette Plank, entitled Clicking with Caution, a guide to staying safe online at school, just to let kids know and parents know the safeguards that are in place, you know, supported by the district, but also some of those very same tools that are tremendous learning experiences for kids and systems that can be implemented by teachers to really support learning in the classroom as well. I wish the attendance had been better, but I think the information was great, and it's definitely something that we'll be fashioning into a presentation that we can share kind of on a larger level as far as that's concerned. In line with talking about the SRO, you know, Mike Duke and I have conversations all the time, just from his kind of police perspective, thinking about how we can inform and keep families informed of other kind of safety-related issues, community-wise, school community, as well as the larger community. So we have a few things in process and things that he is discussing he feels are very important topics for families in the Baldwinsville community just to be aware of. So those are some things in progress in development that will be further discussed over the course of the year.
Alex, like what were those topics?
So he referenced a couple things. You know, he cited some kind of old school thoughts of stranger danger. He talked about things like that, but he also talked about you know, presentations for families and discussions to have if students find themselves in particular positions, lost, you know, displaced, whatever, the types of things, how students can think about maybe reading the environment that they're in to make sure that they would be, you know, going to supportive people. And so he brings that really kind of interesting perspective from, you know, I guess the police perspective that, you know, I didn't really think about. I mean, almost some profiling of how to assess and how to let kids know how they might better navigate some situations should they find themselves in it. He also talked about, you know, again, being very well aware of the community that you live in a variety of ways. So I'm not sure, you know, some of the situations would be tailored to very appropriate conversations with kids, but other things are just raising level of awareness of families so that they are, I guess, keeping themselves as apprised of the community as they possibly could.
I'm going to piggyback on the value of having an SRO in our building. One of the things that we focused on this year is having our SRO present in safe spaces or like spaces where there's not high pressure. My SRO's in lunch from pre-K, well, pre-K is in the room, but through kindergarten through fifth. She just likes to be there. She likes to just interact with the students there, have conversations, help open cheese sticks, and that, you know, just it's true. But, you know, it shows that there's friendliness there, because some kids, you know, and families do have a fear of police, and that is a true thing. So to show that she's safe and she's always there at arrival and dismissal and, you know, answering questions for families. So that's something that we focus on. Or even during the Evolve, she's there, but we use our staff to do that, not her. So it doesn't seem like such an intimidating process coming through. Spoke to this a little bit earlier. We have implemented paired classrooms between grade levels in order just to have like role models or buddies or somebody that they can talk to or read books with and focus on different SEL skills. And then going back to lunch, one of the things is we redesigned. Lunch is always an interesting time in school, no matter what grade. And we redesigned who was having lunch at the same time, and our fifth graders are now our lunch leaders, and they sit. We have a couple fifth graders that sit with kindergarten kids to help be good role models during lunch and help, again, open the cheese sticks, help with the milk, and fifth graders love taking that responsibility. They love, being able to do that and be a leader, and we get to rotate, who it is, every month, and everybody gets a chance to do it, and they're really like latching onto it. And the kindergartners like it as well, because kindergarten, it's their first time really eating in the cafeteria. So that's something we did to try to make it a little bit safer. And we redesigned our dismissal procedures and made sure we had people just in certain spots in the building and kids exiting just to get to the buses. It just made it a lot smoother, and we knew where kids were. And if you're in this classroom, you definitely went out this door, not everybody out the front door, and it just has made things move a lot quicker.
All right. So as I said before, we're going to kind of take a redo on our reorganization of our social emotional MTSS, procedures, and I think we really want to talk about using BIMIS data and utilizing staff for each of those tiers, specifically our student services staff for tiers 2 and tiers 3. So we're talking about social skills groups, but also talking about one-on-one counseling, or the use of our Liberty Resources Specialists, things like that. So excited about kind of refreshing and restarting with that. We also worked really hard. One of the things we noticed, and this actually came out of an MTSS professional development that Kate and I were able to go to with Jenna and Melissa, where we kind of realized with our leadership team that we were lacking that tier 1 shared behavior expectation at Eldon. So we created and are now implementing a behavior matrix, and so it is the 3 B's, being safe, being respectful, being responsible, but in each area of our school. And so we really created it, and it's all over the building. It's in the cafeteria, it's in the hallways. What are the behavior expectations for students? The second part of that was that over the summer, our leadership team actually created slides so that there was common language and a common guide, and every teacher used those when they were explicitly teaching those tier 1 behavior expectations. So it just really brought us together. We have, kind of like a side note, we have a postcard that we're sending home where students are being honored for the 3 B's, and we're really just trying to tie it into everything we're doing. It's also our community cafe topic. So excited about those things.
Okay, we have a lot of things in common at McNamara, but maybe a little bit of a different approach to how we're targeting some of the same things. So in terms of the cafeteria, for us, every school's cafeteria has some challenges in there. And so a few years ago, we actually made some videos using our student council members for the playground, and the student council members modeled how to use all the playground equipment, what was safe, what was not safe, and things like that. So we're going to do that this year using our cafeteria. So we're going to have the student council members model in a video how to follow the expectations in the cafeteria, but also not just the expectations, but what to do with your time when you're in there. So appropriate tips for socialization, and what does it look like if you see somebody sitting by themselves, and just really making that, instead of us just telling students what to do, which we do in the beginning of the school year, but also just showing them and giving them some ideas. So that's something that's in progress soon. Our student council just started a couple of weeks ago. They're up and running now, so we're going to be putting that together soon. And then in terms of BIMIS, so when we get BIMIS data, one way that you can look at it is in the format of triangles. And the bottom triangle is green. That's where we want to see the biggest numbers of students, and that really means that they don't need any intervention. They're showing those indicators in the way that we would anticipate for students at that grade level. And then there's yellow and red. And so there's a protocol called the Grow the Green protocol, where you sit down after having students do the BIMIS, teachers do the BIMIS for students. We sit in data meetings and identify what are the biggest areas that we need to improve across this grade level, and then put in some specific strategies to improve student expectations within very specific categories within the BIMIS. So we're going to do that, and also kind of like some of the other principals shared, use the data meetings to identify who's receiving tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, what that looks like, and just making sure that we're not missing any students that need support. And then we are also holding our community cafe on a similar topic. You may have heard of the book, The Anxious Generation. It's been around for a little while now. It's been pretty popular, but really the whole idea behind the book is the dangers involved with students with children really. It's more outside of school with children accessing social media and the internet and some of the damage that can do. And so we're going to be holding our topic for our community cafe in just a few weeks on raising students in the digital world. Insights from that book, so you don't have to have read the text, but we just want to pull some of the big ideas from that book to share with families, because a lot of our parents will tell us once they've read that book, they've just totally redone how they allow their students to access the internet and social media at home.
So that pretty much covers the action plans for each of our elementary school buildings. As was noted, there's a lot of similarities across the buildings. They're working together as a team to put best practices into place so that students are successful. I do think this also kind of leads nicely into some updates we have with regard to special education supports and services, which was our second topic for discussion this evening. The reason I think there's that strong connection is because of all the things that we do great here in supporting students labeled as having a disability and trying to make sure that we're supporting students in the least restrictive setting. And I think a lot of that is able to happen because of the work of these principals as well as the teachers within our buildings. And so with that, I want to transition to yeah, they can go, or I don't think Gary's going to be too long, but it's all connected.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
So, great presentations, you guys are doing amazing work. The one question that I have, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole right now, is I'd be curious about what you're struggling with. Like where, like you do a great job of highlighting the things that you're doing that are you know, progressing, and I can just tell how proud you are of the work that you're doing, and that's fantastic. But my question is, as a Board of Education, I'd be curious about what it is that you're struggling with, and how can we be a resource for you to be able to, you know, we talk grows and flows, right? So the things that you're growing, that you need to sort of focus more attention on, or things that maybe you're hitting some roadblocks, and you know, because those things are there. So I don't want to go down, but just maybe for future times together, because I'd be curious about those things. Unless you guys are just convinced that you're doing things perfectly, and then we would know that something's up. So yeah.
I'll say one big thing. One thing that I think that we're working to improve this year is our ELA. We've done a comprehensive, you know, overview of our ELA curriculum, and I think that in working with Renee and a team of teachers, we have a great process. We're working with Kate Franz from Syracuse, so we're really looking to streamline our ELA curriculum, make our Tier 1 program stronger. Even though we have great programs, we can always do better, and RTI, being more consistent across the board with the RTI.
Yes, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole.
No,
but
I'm just
I really,
for
but
thought.
no, I love that. I'd really like to dig more into that. Give us specific examples of, you know, the day in, day out struggles that you might be having implementing different types of programs, or getting teachers on board, and you know, those types of things. Because I think I know you're doing that work. I would just like to know about it. So, right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can add that to a future work session discussion. I think it also, going back to where I was going, does tie into supporting students with labeled as having disabilities in our inclusive approach, because that is important work, but it's not easy work. And there are struggles every single day when it comes to making sure that that's being done in an effective way for all students within the classroom, not just those labeled as having a disability. And so they might be afraid to say that right now, but I'm going to say it for them because I think it is important. It is the right work to do, but it's about shifting mindsets, and it's about making sure that we have the supports in place, and that we continue to push and encourage people, because it is not easy. And so with that, we can definitely add more of a discussion with that for a future work session. and I know Sam has a question, and then I think Carrie will bring to light some important pieces of information in her next section here, and then we can open it up for more questions.
Just an observation. Thank you for coming tonight. I did really, RTI stuck out to me. So I feel like maybe that's part of something that you all feel is really important. So I appreciate that work. And the PBL, we were able to see 2 presentations last year at the community cafe. So for me, I feel like there is curiosity. That is, you know, the kids talk amongst themselves and the questions that they came up with, and it was just exciting to see a different way of learning for students. And I just want to thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Yeah. So I echo that. It's great. It's great to see the difference in cooperation and culture. I mean, I've seen this like, what, 17 years ago maybe, where everybody would come with their own set and nobody talked to each other, I felt like sometimes. But it's wonderful the culture you're creating. And I have to say, I think Eldon's newsletter, you had a staff spotlight in there.
Yeah.
What a great idea doing spotlights, you know? I don't know who thought of that, but that's a great idea.
Actually, she did, and that's how we connect. Kate
Okay.
did a new staff spotlight, and I stole it and said I'm going to do a new staff spotlight and keep going with a staff spotlight.
Oh, good. And the other thing is the open houses, where we made a family open house, is great. And I was at Van Buren last year, was at Reynolds this year, was at Ellen last year, and it was at McNamara this year. I'm not going to Palmer, I'm afraid of Alex, so. but thank you so much, and Cindy, congratulations. Appreciate it very much.
So my pleasure.
Have a great, people have told me retirement's the best job yet, but I'm.
Looking good.
Okay, keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, I agree that Dr. Barbary brought up that the challenges are, you're hearing the solution-focused view of the staff that are really addressing the needs of our students, and we stretch our staff on a daily basis to do the things that we knew are best. And it came up a couple times tonight, so I think it is really a great opportunity to talk about some of these things. You know, we have these sort of competing ideas where we have to offer a continuum of supports and services per New York State. We have, and on that continuum, there's, you know, consultant teacher, integrated co-teaching, resource, special class, even like home instruction is something that's on there. Within the realm of that idea, you want to provide what's best for students. And the easier thing to do sometimes is to offer a self-contained or a more restrictive setting. But we push on a daily basis to really meet students where they're at and have those meetings to provide supports that really are inclusive. And with that in mind, when we offer a continuum, it really truly is, we're making those decisions in the least restrictive environment and as a last resort as we move down that continuum. So we also don't offer, you know, it's sort of a misconception, I would say, that, you know, a continuum support needs to be offered as a place in a building that's over here, right? That you need to call a person to come provide a service or a support. That maybe if we have this philosophy, fantasy as much as it sounds, that we all can provide supports and students and they're all our children in a true integrated setting, then we're meeting kids where they're at and we're adapting based on the needs of students on a minute-by-minute basis, which is not easy. So sometimes that means that we're stretching to the point where, and I think it came up a little bit in this conversation, and Christy, I think you had asked, well, you know, so you have some different sections of co-teaching. We're stretching that evolution of inclusion mindset where, you know, it used to be inclusion was in this classroom, in this place. And what we found was that over time, we developed a cohort of students who got co-teaching, 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 and those handful of students were together, K through 12. And we didn't do that intentionally, but it really wasn't true integration. So we're stretching now to say, we'll have multiple sections of co-teaching. And if we have to offer a self-contained setting or more restrictive classroom for students who need it, maybe we don't have to do it in a special place delivered by one person all day, every day. Maybe it's for a subject that they need because that's their significant disability. But over here, they can integrate and be in a least restrictive environment with their peers. So that's the stretch, because then, you know, we also have this, we're monitored on state indicators, right? Where indicator 5, which is the number of students, the percent of students in their participation in the general education setting. And we know that historically, as part of our strategic plan, and as one of the things we're monitored on, and what the Baldwinsville School offers is, you know, that percentage in comparison to both the state and at the national level is a little bit higher. And we do stand out, and we've talked about that data here in previous meetings, but we are constantly, guiding our questions with that philosophy in mind. Does this fit our commitment to inclusion? Does it foster a sense of belonging? Is it what's best for students? Are we adapting to what students need to provide true inclusion and integration so that they can be successful post-secondary, and that our students learn to live with each other and understand diversity, because we know that that's what's best, that's what the research shows. But at the end of the day, those decisions are made following a process at a CSE meeting and driven by what is best for that individual student. So even though we might say, hey, we don't have that program here, we don't really say that. We have a meeting and we say, what does a student need and how do we support them within this setting? But at the end of the day, if a student really needs something, we offer it, and those decisions are made at a CSE meeting. These are just the guiding questions that we use for our philosophy, which is that, you know, you heard it in the mission and vision at the beginning of the meeting, that mindset isn't a program, it's not a place. Or inclusion is not a place or a program, it's a mindset, and we're doing what we can constantly to inspire that. And you heard it embedded in all of the goals tonight and the secondary one that was done a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I was thinking to that end, having a truly inclusive culture. A lot of you talked about using student leaders, 5th grade helping first graders, things like that. I truly hope students with IEPs and 504s are included in that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway is when, for me, is just, does everybody understand why we're doing that, right? So if I have a parent that feels like their child's not getting what they need, I certainly want them to feel comfortable to discuss that, and I want to be able to address that at a meeting and meet them where they're at. But I also want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all our students in the most inclusive way possible. And for me, that's really just having those conversations and people feeling supported to come forward to be able to discuss that so that we can address those needs and move together collaboratively. And it's not about, I think too, the other biggest thing that I took away from our previous meeting was, it's not about resource allocation or funding, really, because certainly we could always figure out a way to do it the other way, which was, if you think of the evolution of inclusion where students were segregated or then they were integrated, and now we're offering these fully inclusive places where students can be included, and it's not in a separate space or place. It's not necessarily about resource allocation, it's about how we provide those supports that match the real world.
I have a question. So, in the slide, in the K-5 slide, students that are in the gen ed setting is 83%, which is pretty impressive.
Yes, yes.
I'm curious about the students that are there less than 40% of the day, that's 5.6. Is there for lack of a better word, is there like a level? Is it high school? Is it middle school?
Yeah.
Is it a combination of?
Yes, I can answer that. So it's a pretty low percentage, again, comparison to the 17.5 state target and also what other places are doing. Where that percentage is higher, and again, this is where if I think, and I'm hoping that the new graduation requirements actually change this, those are students who are what are considered NYSA eligible, and they are here till they're 22. So for the most part, they are in, they're in a 12-in-1 program at the secondary level, and they're also job coaching most of the day, so they are taken out of the gen ed setting, and they're meeting their own individual needs, going job coaching with, it's very individualized, it meets their needs, but I'm hoping that with the new graduation requirements, there might be more opportunities for them to get that within a more inclusive place or setting.
Other questions related to special education services or supports based on previous conversation?
Yeah, I just think it sounds really nice to say, oh, it's not about resources. We can always make something work. But I think there's always room for us to improve.
Agreed.
And I think that there are times when things, despite the best laid plans, go awry. There's a substitute in the classroom.
Yes.
Stuff like that, And I just think those are the areas, the unusual areas that we can always look at and say, are there areas where we can improve to, accommodate the students that are, I think inclusivity is absolutely the goal. And what we're doing is so impressive. I think what happens sometimes is because they're in the general classroom, if you have a substitute or things, start to go awry, suddenly they don't have the resources they need to be successful.
Yes, I agree. I think what I was saying was to get us, the reason we don't offer more self-contained settings isn't because of resources. In fact, what you're saying is the opposite or the alternative, that the more we include students, the more opportunities we have.
Yeah, so, as a board, that's our goal, to make sure, there are resources. And I think, I certainly want to hear about that.
Yes.
And I think with that, if you really look back to prior to us implementing, I'd say the 2010 through 12-ish school year, whenever we started to really integrate with integrated co-teaching, we have added significant number of special education teachers within this district across the K-12 spectrum to make sure that we're supporting students in that least restrictive way. To Carrie's point, it is a lot easier. It's a lot probably less financial allocation of funds for us to have a more restrictive model. And so I think that speaks to the fact that this board and previous boards who have been very supportive of allocating additional funding to support the needs of really what our community has asked for. It's a part of our strategic plan. It's been a part for the last several years. So I think I speak on behalf of all of us where we appreciate the comments related to additional resources, and we will be prepared to, when we talk about our budget for the 26-27 school year, what additional supports do we feel need to be put into place so that we can even more appropriately support all of our students across the district.
And I just want to say, on the other end of the spectrum, I was really impressed to hear about what you're doing related to enrichment as well.
Can I say one more thing? I'm still curious about this. So, the 5.6, and this is my background. This is what I do. Yeah. And so what I wonder about is, and I don't know if you toss this or shoot on this idea, is that, and we know this, is like when kids are in elementary school, we're pretty good at including them all. And then they get to middle school and it becomes a little bit harder because the curriculum becomes more of an issue, right? And then they get to high school and that's where, so kids they're included a little bit less, and then they get to high school. And they're in a much more self-contained setting. I wonder if we've talked about that, and we think about that. It's sort of like we start off including, and then it gets less and less and less. And I believe me, I know that's a big issue, and that, you know.
We absolutely have talked about that. We
Yeah.
always talk about that, and
Yeah.
I think that's why we're seeing some of the shifts at the middle school level specifically, where we are trying to offer, again, we offer the continuum, but we're really pushing for students to be in that least restrictive setting, and so.
So what does that look like? I mean,
It doesn't look like a 12-to-1 in grade 6,
No.
or a 15-to-1 setting.
No, but I mean, like, so you're saying at the high school level.
So, yeah, so as students are transitioning through, so right now we've made some adjustments at Ray. We will continue with that cohort of students so that as this cohort of students makes their way through high school, you're going to see them in a more least restrictive setting more percentage of the time compared to what you're seeing right now of students with disabilities at that high school level in that setting.
I think that's awesome. So good, that's good work. And believe me, I'm not saying this to be critical. I'm thoroughly impressed with the job you do. You know that, right?
They do it.
Well, I mean, but there's got to be leadership, right? And there's got to be collaboration. I agree with what people were saying. It is so nice to see people sitting around a table that are actually here to share what we're doing, but also to support one another, right? And so yeah, good stuff.
Like you said, it's not easy, it's important work, it's the right work, and that's why this is important. So thank you for the continued support.
I just had a question about the enrichment programs after school. Do you find that all students are taking part in those programs, or is there a little bit of the students that might need special transport or need a teaching assistant?
We're all jumping at it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think we all would say yes to this. So we definitely have students who have special transportation. I have 2 teaching assistants that stay after on Tuesday and 2 that stay on Wednesday. So it's offered to everybody, and then we do have families from, families for students of all needs that support that program. So
Agreed.
and if a student is interested, then we provide the support.
Yes.
I mean, the idea too, right, Mindy, is that that's part of IDEA, right? Is that they have the right to have written into their IEP that extra support for after-school activities. And so the district then supports if it's in the IEP, so that's great.
And that even extends to our, and this is an enrichment, but our early drop-off. So we offer early drop-off, and we have teaching assistants in addition to the teaching assistants who are just supervising the students, but we have families that participate in that as well that have students that need one-on-one teaching assistance.
You take IDEA out of the picture, students that need medical support or that support as well, we have nursing staff available so that they can participate just like every other student. I truly do believe what makes this community and this district special compared to what's happening in others.
Again, and I'm gonna, this is it. I get a chance to work with school districts all over the state in my role of what I do. And we really should be proud of what we're doing. And on top of that, one of the things that is very impressive to me is, maybe this is the whole district, is we're not happy with, I mean, we're constantly, we're not happy. We're not sort of resting on our laurels, right? We're always being sort of reflective, how can we get better? And so I really do want to throw that out there and appreciate that, right? Yeah.
I guess that concludes the workshop. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you to everyone, and
Thank you.
we'll adjourn our work session, so thank you and have a good evening.
Alex, what's the makeover?